What is up, everybody? Raymond Summerlin here. This is the Sharp Angles podcast, the Thursday edition, the fantasy football preview edition. And so, since I'm previewing fantasy football, there's only one person to do that with, and that is Rich Rebard, Lord Reeves. I think I just called you Rich Rebard. I don't know why I did that. I've said your name on a podcast 150,000 times. So I don't know how I did that one. But anyway, Mr. Rebard, how are you doing, buddy?
There's nothing wrong with choosing the bard at the D&D table.
I actually was playing D&D last night. Wednesdays night's my D&D night, and I am in fact, you're gonna be shocked to learn this. I am in fact the bard.
There you go.
And I uh I went chaotic evil with this one. I call him CPAP Rocky. And so this is he's part of the thick neck gang with me, you know. Gotta get that CPAP so you don't die in your sleep. Get checked for that, by the way, everybody. If you wake up feeling tired, your body might be trying to kill you at night. Go get a CPAP and change your life. Anyway, so Sharp Football Cares. I don't know. Is that a PSA?
Yeah, absolutely, man. But listen, sleep's important. You got to get the right sleep.
Totally. Yeah, I need to see if there's like a sleep council that can sponsor the podcast. Old CPAP Rocky over here. All right. So we're
I'll
going to
take
talk
whatever
about
pillows we can get, man. Can we get some pillows and some stuff?
Oh, that actually, I'd be into that. Sleepopolis is a website that I have read reviews of mattresses on because I read reviews of everything of because ADHD. I read reviews of every single thing, and that website's great. So Sleepopolis, if you're listening, I would dig some free pillows for
Let me
sure.
tell you what, I
But
did
we're gonna
not
talk.
get a lot of sleep on Sunday. I have a team. To segue this, I had a team that had not only Anthony Richardson, not only Justin Jefferson, but also had Devin Achane on it. All three got whammied. Just take that. Just team got accordion. Just folded.
That is rough. That is very rough. I was so big on Justin Jefferson and I play, most of my season long stuff is best ball. So it is, what it is. And so actually the teams that I manage, are mostly dynasty teams. That's the way I like to play teams that I'm going to manage week to week. And I was huge on Justin Jefferson. I have Justin Jefferson in so many dynasty leagues. I have him in the dynasty league that you and I are in together. I was huge on Justin Jefferson, and everything was going really, really good until last week. And so we'll see how those
Yeah.
teams survive moving forward. We're going to talk about that situation and kind of what are we going to do with that passing game and the wide receivers and all of that. But before we get to talking about, week 6, and we're going to talk a little bit about a promo we have coming up, which I'm really excited about because there's a poster of you and I playing the roles of Ned Campbell and Drew Barrymore in Scream, which that's my dream really is for you and I to reenact that at some point. That might be something we get to do tomorrow for the social channels. We can
I try to
reenact.
reenact being Nev Campbell very often in my day to day.
But anyway, so we have a promo coming up. It's going to be Friday the 13th on Friday, so we're slashing all of our prices. No tricks, just treats. We're giving you 79% off. 79% off all weekly packages site wide when you use the code slash. Why are we saying 79% off? That's how accurate Warren Sharp's plays on over totals have been lifetime. And his strongest play in over a year just hit last week with the Jets and Broncos game. We actually talked about that on the Sunday recap show, how there was some consternation, I guess you could say, in the Slack over all of the field goals that the Broncos and Jets were kicking, and Nathaniel Hackett's refusal to call a pass that gets thrown into the end zone in the red zone. But you won your Super Bowl, Nate. So good for you. But anyway, that game went over. We hit on that game 79% over the lifetime. That's why that 79% is there. We want you to jump on board. We want you to get there. Our props package has also been killing. We've been doing really, really well with our picks. Rich's DFS picks have been killing. We've been doing great. So use code slash. You get 79% off any weekly package. Sale ends Friday the 13th at midnight. Ooh, Friday the 13th at midnight. I actually didn't know it's Friday the 13th. Is that a thing people care about in your life? Because I don't feel like that's a thing people care about in my life anymore.
No, I just did watch Friday the 13th, the final chapter, for a rewatch the other day, though. That's the one
Spending
with,
your time
that's the
wisely.
one with Crispin Glover where he has the dance, you know? Yeah.
Crispin Glover. It's a name I have not thought about in a very, very long time. I guess it's the last time I watched Back to the Future.
Yeah, Courtney
So
also in that one. Very 80s. It's a very 80s movie.
very, very good. You can find that code, by the way, / in the description on the podcast and also on the YouTube channel, which we do this live on YouTube every single week at 11:30 Eastern on Thursday. So go over to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You'll find us, subscribe, and there we are. All right, that's all out of the way. Let's talk about it. We're going to move on to my favorite segment of the week, Real or Fake. My favorite segment because of this beautiful graphic that's about to show up on the screen. Thank you very much. The Shrek dragon, really enjoying. And let's talk about this is just where we talk about a few of the performances, a few of the situations, and what's real and fake out of them. And I think we have to get started with Kyle Pitts, who actually showed up last week. Kyle Pitts showed up for the first time this year, had a decent game. Are you kind of buying into this? It kind of seems, just not to put words in your mouth, but from reading the worksheet, you're treating Kyle Pitts and George Kittle and Dallas Goedert, all of whom hit last week, the same way.
Yeah.
Well, those guys are getting targets. They're talented. I guess we're going to play them. I assume that's still where you sit with Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about the construct of the tight end position, and it was a big week for a lot of those guys. The tight end position had been very gross. Actually, Goddard had the first 100-yard receiving game by a tight end this season last week. The fact that they all kind of hit together. Obviously, Logan Thomas had a huge week. Cole Kmet's had a couple weeks where he's hit, but it was a really good tight end week. It took 5 weeks to get there, so hopefully we can string a few together. But with that low bar position, we're talking about just a lack of talent and upside, because everyone has low floors at the tight end position, but this is why you stick with the guys like Kittle and Goddard that have these high weeks. So Pitts hasn't given us that type of week yet. From a talent perspective, we believe he has it, but he hasn't given us the fantasy run out where he can get like 25, 30 points. But that's why you just play these guys at these low power positions, because the floor doesn't matter. And the ceilings, when these guys can hit, it can really tilt the week. I mean, everyone's done the Kittle experience. Like, we've all done that over like the last 4 years. Someone's rostered George Kittle somewhere over the last 4 years, and this is the life you live. But with Pitts, it's a little different this year than last, because he actually is running the routes. Like last year, it was a thing where like he had this like share of team targets, he had this share of team air yards, but he wasn't running any routes in context of the position. He was running like 20 routes per pass game. He's already run 151 pass routes. He is 7th in routes run at tight end, and then he's got the high target share and he's got the high air yard share. The thing with Kyle Pitts that I'm having a hurdle getting over is he doesn't look fully healthy.
I think that's true.
Everything looks like a contested catch with him. He's not creating like the wide the gaps of separation. Because maybe you watch Kyle Pitts in years past and you'd say, man, if he just had a quarterback, like he's open on this throw, he's creating separation. We haven't really seen that. Maybe over the course of the season, we see his health rebound and we see him getting kind of, he looks more explosive. But right now, he just doesn't look very explosive to me. So we need kind of the efficiency to kind of hang around like it was last week. But he is actually running pass routes this year. The Falcons have thrown a little bit more than they did last year.
And I think, like, to your point, there was a play last week. He actually made the catch where he kind of got off the line. He kind of flared off the line and then found a hole in the zone, and Ritter stared him down, and he was the first read, and that's what Ritter does, and it's great. But he, hit the open hole in the zone, and he was able to catch the pass. But it just stood out to me that like it was kind of lumbering. Like it wasn't what I, like you said, it's not what you expect out of Kyle Pitts. So I do think there's maybe some of that there as well. And you would expect that that's only going to get better as we move through the season, unless he aggravates the injury. It's only going to get better throughout the season. And you mentioned he's getting, the opportunities, 21% target share. He has an 11 target game and a 9 target game in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Something I'm really interested in keeping an eye on with this passing game. And these splits have not really affected Pitts this year. He's only played, he didn't play last season with Ritter, and so it hasn't really affected him this year. But Desmond Ritter is starting to kind of get that Jared Goff thing going at a much lower fantasy level. But his home and road splits have been significant. Now he's only played 5 home games. He's only played 4 road games.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very small sample, but it's just something to pay attention to. In 5 home games, he has 215 yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, 7.5 yards per attempt. In 4 road games, he has 177 yards per game, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and 5.5 yards per attempt. And I wonder if, as we're trying to play this game with Kyle Pitts, I wonder if we should be focusing more on home games for them kind of moving forward, which they have this week. So we'll kind of see if they get to build.
Oh, I mean, it has to just tie back to he's not sleeping right on the road.
Yeah, no, he's got to get he's got to get that ResMed travel CPAP machine so he could sleep. He could sleep. This is we're gonna have the this is gonna be the weirdest promos, the weirdest sponsors of any fantasy football podcast of all time will be our sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, the home
Nothing
road
but
stuff
sleep
is always
optimist
one
and
of those
CPAP.
things because we did it with Ben Roethlisberger for so long. Like Amari Cooper is one of these guys that consistently, it's like it's hard to quantify like what's actually happening with like those. Like Goff is living it right now, and it happened again with Goff last week, right? Like it's the same thing. It's like the same story. Like some things we just don't have answers for.
And like the thing with Goff and the thing with Roethlisberger and the thing with Cooper is that they were long enough that you just had to accept that they were leaving. We're not there
Right.
with Ritter yet, and so we'll see. This is just something to pay attention to. And like I said, it hasn't trickled down to Pitts yet. But if that continues, you're going to expect to see that trickle to Pitts and trickle to London and Jonnu Smith, the actual tight end one on the Atlanta Falcons. Now it's going to kind of cycle through all of them. So just kind of
It's
pay attention.
Arthur Smith just must be the Johnny Smith whisperer.
I mean, yeah, it works. As soon as they traded for him, I was like, "Oh, this is this, this could be trouble. This could be trouble for old Kyle Pitts." The other situation you brought it up at the top, we definitely need to talk about is in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson, who has been placed on short-term injured reserve. Although there are reports out there that the short term might not be so short term, given his contract situation and kind of where Minnesota is right now. So that's something to certainly pay attention to and potentially cry in the shower about, which I might do. Which I might do later. But we have to look at the Minnesota offense kind of moving forward and what we think about this receiving core. There were reports that came out direct kind of in the aftermath of him going on injured reserve that KJ Osborne was going to step into that role. I'm going to press X for doubt on that. Jordan Addison, this is why they drafted him. So I think
Mhm.
that we're prioritizing Addison, but I guess the question is like how real is him as like a wide receiver too? Are you really kind of buying in that we're starting him every week and we're feeling really good about
Yeah, I mean, I still feel pretty positive about Jordan Addison. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I mean, I keep going back to the 2021 season when Kenny Pickett was coming out and, watching Kenny Pickett and try to diagnose what we had in Kenny Pickett. And every time I watched Kenny Pickett, I was just like, well, this dude's really good. This wide receiver is really good. And so, like, I go back to like a 2-year sample of Jordan Addison being really good. He's flexible. He plays inside. He plays outside, even though he's not the biggest guy. So I am pretty positive him. Obviously, comes with the draft capital, and he's already been better than KJ Osborne has been. So I'm just going to lean into that. Now, how stable do we get him being like a wide receiver 2+? I think it's to be determined. I'll start out like treating him as like a wide receiver 3 with upside. I do have faith in this system. Just because the history of kind of like this coaching tree and the type of offense they run and churning out some production. The schedule's also not hard for the Vikings over this period. So I am pro Jordan Addison. KJ Osborne had enough spike weeks to close last year to at least keep the lights on, but he's been so bad to start this season. I mean, he's not getting targeted at all. He's run one of the highest route totals in the NFL and just not drawing any targets at all. He's averaging fewer than a yard per route run on the season. Even Brandon Powell stepped in a very, that when Justin Jefferson left that game and played better than KJ Osborne has this season.
it.
So
He was a name I was going to bring up to you. I was going to ask, do we? I actually picked him up in a deeper dynasty league that he was available in, and that I just need bodies. I had Justin Jefferson in that one as well, and I think I might start him this week because, like you said, what we saw after Jefferson left the game, and they are an 11 personnel team. He's probably going to be on the field. Jalen Naylor is on IR. That's actually my real crush in this receiver room, but he's on IR. Like you think that Powell's going to get the targets. And the other thing about it is the volume's probably going to be there. They would probably like to run more and pass less with Justin Jefferson off the field, but maybe we get situations like we did a couple weeks ago when Kirk Cousins threw what is it 19 passes or something like that against the Panthers. But for most game situations, given the state of their team and their defense, this team is going to have to throw the ball, especially in the second half. And if that volume's there, if we don't trust KJ Osborne to get it, he has a 12.8% target share. TJ Hawkinson's going to get a lot of it. Jordan Addison's going to get a lot of it. There might be some left for Powell. And so I'm deeper leagues. I'm pretty interested in him. And I was interested in kind of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously, familiar system guy. He was kind of like the gadget guy loosely with the Rams when Kevin O'Connell was there. That's why we see these guys come over and they fill like kind of these back end roster spots, right? On these teams. Like the coaches are familiar with them. They know the system. They can kind of come in and just be able to adapt. Instead of, like you said, playing a guy that hadn't played and just thrusting him in and say, all right, go out there and take this role Justin Jefferson is playing.
Exactly.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
So yeah, I mean, we're talking the deepest of dynasty leagues. Like,
yes.
Yeah, you take some shots there because I do think it's going to get kind of spread around, right? Like, no one's just going to take Justin Jefferson's vacated target role. Like, that's not happening, even for Addison. Like, Addison's not just going to step in and get 30% of the team targets. So I think it's going to be a lot more dispersed, like a sum of parts. Maybe we even see the backs get a little bit more in the passing game than they've gotten so far. As well. But when you remove a piece like Justin Jefferson from an offense, the tide is going to be inherently lowered overall.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. But I wonder if we get into like last season where they just have to throw. The volume's just going to be there because they just have to throw. We also need to talk about another injury. James Conner also placed on injured reserve. I guess we're not going to talk about the Devin Achane injury because we know what happens with that. Raheem Mostert. Jeff Wilson might come back this week. Seems like he's coming back this week. Raheem Mostert, is going to be the lead back there. But the James Conner injury is, I guess, more interesting because of first of all, how good they've been running the football. Some of that has been James Conner, but they've been just good as an offense in general. And so you're more interested in the situation than you may have thought of. Like if Conner was hurt before week 1, I don't think we'd really care about Keontae Ingram or Amari DiMercato.
Right.
But now after we've seen through 5 weeks, you're like, okay, this is interesting. DiMercato is definitely the back of sharp football. With Curtis and he's the one that we're leaning into. But I'll be honest, I'm a little bit worried that we're just overlooking Keontae Ingram. Do you have any concern about that?
I mean, Keontae Ingram was ahead of DiMercato as like the 2, but like that's one of those things like we don't know from a depth chart perspective, like if being like the backup was like the actual being the backup. Do you know what I mean? Because during that span, DiMercato was still playing on more passing downs than Ingram as well. So it could be kind of a role thing where both guys kind of get involved. And DiMercato's like kind of just, getting the extension of the role he had. It's also tough because Keontae Ingram's been really bad in the NFL, like in the sample we've had. Last year he had 27 carries for only 60 yards. Prior to injury this year, he had only 15 yards on 12 carries. So like he hasn't given us even a sniff of like being a productive NFL back, or at least DiMercato like teased us a little bit last week. He had the long touchdown run. And that's what this team has done under Drew Petzing is like they've created explosives in the run game rather consistently. They're second in the NFL in rate of runs to go for 5 or more yards. They're 7th in the NFL in rate of runs to go for 10 or more yards. So they have been able to scheme up some explosives in the run game, which kind of, like I said, we do like having a little bit of faith in here. Obviously, we don't know, right? Like we're taking a leap of faith on a guy like DiMercato. It doesn't, very limited resume, wasn't any type of draft capital like put into him. We'll see if Ingram even plays too this weekend, which is kind of like a wild card. So a lot of people need running back bodies. So I'm not going to push back and yuck anyone's yum that's taking a shot here. I would say the situation's good enough and he's shown enough to at least say like, yeah, he's got a little bit of an edge until we get clarity on the Bears situation and like who's going to be available this week too. DiMercato is kind of showing up as like the punt play of choice for DFS too, if you're going to pay down.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair as well, especially because I think we expect the Rams offense to cook a little bit in this game. And so either way, even if Ingram is healthy, DiMercato was already the passing down back. That's going to lean more into him. And you mentioned it that Ingram was, the number 2. I believe that DiMercato played just 2 fewer offensive snaps in the first 3 weeks or something like that. So it wasn't like a clear stratification between these two. They were sharing. And I do think that we might, when Ingram gets healthy, we might see more of a share than we'd like to see for those of us who have spent a lot of fab dollars on DiMercato. But, it is what it is. At some point, I was a big fan of Keontae Ingram. It seems like I'm wrong about that. He hasn't produced.
Well, I think that's the lesson for most backup running backs, right? Like we think just being the RB2 on the depth chart means that you're going to occupy the same role that the incumbent had, which is that's very rarely ever the case, right? Like we're seeing a little bit with Jerome Ford. Like you very rarely does like you have a good running back, and James Conner is a good running back. Obviously, he misses time, but he's a good running back, and he's trusted in kind of any situation in offense. Whereas typically when guys like that miss times, you end up seeing things like happen with Josh Kelly, or is going, like I said, going on with Jerome Ford. You get more of a compartmentalized, all hands on deck. And we might even see that in Chicago more than people want to believe because everyone loves Roschon.
Yeah. The one thing about the Chicago situation, since we're talking about it, we can get into it a little bit. One thing about the Chicago situation is Johnson jumped Dante Foreman, who is a legitimate NFL back who was very successful with the Panthers last year. He jumped Foreman like in no time, and a rookie does that in no time. Like it makes you think, okay, the coaching staff is really in on this guy,
But he
and so
jumped him
that
for a
is
specific role because we talked about this when you were setting
fair.
the lineups
Yep.
before that Broncos game, and I was in
Yep.
on Khalil Herbert, and I was saying, well, look under the hood. Roschon's only playing in these certain situations. So what if they want to keep him in that, and like Deontay Foreman's just like an early down grinder?
I'm glad you got to bring up my $1 million mistake on Khalil Herbert. Thank you. Thank you for twisting. Thank you for twisting that.
Well, no, because I think a lot of people have had the wrong signal of like Roschon Johnson's early season role in general, just because we look at the snaps. But he has only played when the Bears are getting flooded.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. That's fair too. Yeah, that Khalil Herbert not playing Khalil Herbert against the Broncos is going. That's going to haunt. That's going to haunt me for a very long time. Last thing I want to talk about here in Real or Fake is I just want to talk about the Patriots offense. I guess bring it down a little bit, bring the sadness. Um, the Patriots offense is currently 28th in yards per play, 32nd in points per drive, 32nd in EPA per play, 27th in success rate, 29th in yards per attempt, and 29th in yards per carry. But other than that, it's it, it's going great. Um, the reason I wanted to bring up the Patriots offense, I guess there are two questions here. One is like, is it going to be this bad? Are we just thinking that this just is going to be one of the worst offenses in the league? We saw like glimmers of hope in week 1, and it's just been dreadful ever since. And then the other part is, we weren't really drafting pieces of this offense,
Right.
this passing game specifically. I mean, this passing game, but we did draft Ramondre Stevenson, and not only has the offense been bad, but his usage is going the wrong way. So I guess how worried are we about how do we think this offense can bounce back? And how worried are we here about Ramondre Stevenson?
Yeah, I mean, it's low hanging fruit to say it's got to be better than what it's been. I mean, they haven't scored more than 20 points in a game. I will say they have faced really good defenses. That's like I will at least give them an out that they faced a lot of talented defenses. I mean, Eagles, Dolphins, Jets, Cowboys, Saints, all like when we talk about defensive units, pretty good. They're gonna be at least up there if we were ranking defenses. So that's one thing. You get the Raiders. Like you got to show us something against the Raiders at least. But yeah, I mean, you got to be concerned because there's just no talent on this offense, like speed. There's no speed. There's no juice on this offense, the way they've structured it. And that's a huge problem.
Well,
What's that?
they refuse to play Demario Douglas.
Well, he's getting in there a little bit, but the
well, I know
concept
he suffered a concussion last week, so
yeah.
you take some of that away from him. But yeah, through the first 4 weeks, there's no excuse for what we saw. So I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, the offensive line has been banged up too, which has played into some of the run game issues. Yeah, it's really hard to have like a full-fledged optimism on like the upside here, especially with the way, because it'd be one thing if like Ramondre Stevenson wasn't playing well and they just benched him and we have another running back to play. But now it's just like a terrible split with Ezekiel Elliott, and like we can't play either guy right now. Unless like you just hope one of them falls into the end zone. That's like where we are with the situation. I had a lot of questions.
Patriots don't score touchdowns.
Then
how are they going to fall in the end zone if the Patriots don't score touchdowns?
Ramondre was a guy I had a lot of pause on coming into the season anyways, because I just thought the way he got his fantasy points last year weren't going to be stable, especially in the passing game, and that's kind of rolled over. Like my number one question was how like him rolling over his target share and the usage he had in the pass game, and it hasn't. So like it's been a big kind of like that's really dragged him down significantly because he hasn't been able to make up for this offensive line and the rushing inefficiency that this offense has had. So we do need that part of his aspect of his fantasy game to come back because it was such a component of creating his floor last year for fantasy that now that we've removed that, it's really, again, the floor is the basement now.
And you mentioned kind of the split that's occurring. It's also occurring, or at least last week, it started to occur in the passing game.
Yes.
Stevenson has run 114 routes to 59 for Zeke, but last week it was 15 for Stevenson and 10 for Zeke. And so if that split's going to start to decrease too, then it's a bad offense, and Stevenson's usage is shrinking, and it's like that's just a recipe for disaster. Maybe it bounces back. Maybe Bailey Zappi will save this offense. I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one. But I think like it really is a referendum on kind of the Bill Belichick, the GM, because
Yes.
you mentioned it. The offensive line is not good, and it's not even healthy. But even when it's healthy, it's not good. And the playmakers on the outside are just they aren't it. Like they have nobody really to make these plays. They gave Devontae Parker all that money. I'm glad he got his money. I'm never going to begrudge anybody getting the money, but I don't really understand why you let Jacoby Myers walk and then give the same contract to Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't understand why, and we'll see if Jacoby Myers makes them pay this week for that. And I just like I those types of decisions that we have decision after decision after decision like that, and obviously we know about the draft miscues when it comes to wide receivers.
You
Hey,
got a
but
stationary quarterback. And
N'Keal Harry got elevated to the Vikings, so everything's fine. But yeah, no, you have a stationary quarterback. You have to have a good offensive line and people can throw to, and they just don't.
yeah, this team is very structurally built like I don't know, like an 80s football team, right? Like it's just not with the times offensively.
Yeah, it's sad. Right, sorry, that's right. That's right. House mix play. Sad Patriots, sad boy vibes. Neither of us are even Patriots fans. I'm not really a fan of any NFL team. Neither of us are really Patriots fans. It is kind of just sad though. I like Ramondre. He had a really good year last year, and
I
it
want good
disappointing.
fantasy players. Like I will
Yeah.
not give me just any viable. Like you see the guys that get removed from our fantasy lineups, the injuries already this season. I need viable players. I'll take it wherever they come from. Just give me viable fantasy plays.
You want to keep the sad vibes going and talk about the Cowboys offense? I was looking at I was looking at the schedule this week, and I was trying to find games that we could talk about. And the schedule this week is just it's it's not great. It's not great. But the one kind of like oasis I think we have is the Cowboys Chargers on Monday Night Football. But then the Cowboys just get absolutely demolished by the 49ers. We talked about it before that game that the Cowboys offense had before that game, it had one time they needed to come through and they didn't. Now they've needed to come through in two games and they failed both times. So I guess the question is, can we trust this offense at all? Like I know Tony Pollard's getting the touches. We're gonna keep playing him. CeeDee Lamb is CeeDee Lamb, but like how 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 excited can we even get about this offense, even in a matchup against the Chargers that you would think is pretty good?
Yeah, I don't know, like levels of excitement. Obviously, we're at a point where we want to start like seeing some people show us something, right? But I mean, like
Yeah.
it's not that they failed. The degree of which they failed, I think a lot of us expected it to not be a fantasy bonanza against the 49ers defense. The degree of which they failed was definitely the alarming part, right? Like, Dak throwing the 3 interceptions, they just get flooded. The Cowboys have had one of the weirder starts to the season, right? I wrote about this a little bit. The Cowboys have not played, they haven't run one single offensive play in the second half where the game is within 7 points in either direction. They're the only team in the NFL. It's just super weird. They've been really wonky game scripts to start the year, which is kind of tough. It made it like the guys that it's impacted the most are the guys like Lamb and Pollard, right? Like Pollard's only played 23 second half snaps the past 2 weeks because of the game scripts that they've been in. They were absolutely smoking the Patriots, and then they were getting smoked by the 49ers. And that's happened to Lamb both games as well. You would hope that this would be more of a neutral game script, and facing this Chargers defense that's been kind of giving up the bag through the air, you would see like more of a get right spot. But it's just been such a weird start, game script wise for them, that it's kind of hard to get like a full like pulse on like what's going on there. It is hard to shake though, going back to the Cardinals game, that like they didn't really do a lot against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are still getting walked all over by everybody. So that's what the part that's troubling. But it's a 5-game sample. Like, we know there's talent here. I do think it will get corrected to a degree. I'm not necessarily like running for. I would buy, if like gamers want to sell CeeDee Lamb and want to sell Tony Pollard, I would buy those guys.
I think when I look at this offense, my biggest concern is just the lack of big plays. Like they're not getting explosive plays, and that's a concern, given like you said, the talent that they have. The way they're using Brandon Cooks and not getting Brandon Cooks kind of more involved down the field. They're 29th in air yards per attempt. They're 16th in the rate of 20-plus yard pass plays. Tony Pollard has managed a 10-yard run on just 7.4% of his attempts. It was 16.1% last year. The explosive plays just aren't there, and it's very hard to dink and dunk your way down the field in the NFL. I'm pretty sure you've written about this. I know Warren's written about this. Getting explosive plays is the way that you score, and they're not getting explosive plays. And I think that could be a factor of coaching, which was something that I worried about coming into the season. And I wonder if we even have, they have all of these issues in the red zone. Again, another function of coaching that Warren Sharp wrote a great piece last week about things they could do to fix it in the red zone. Very simple things they could do. We'll see if that happens. They didn't really get into the red zone last week. So we'll see if that happens. But there are all these like little things. Get Brandon Cooks going down the field. Start pushing the ball a little bit more down the field. Your offensive line is healthy now, right? Try to get Tony Pollard, I guess, in space a little bit more. It's not there, and that makes me worry that we're not going to see that kind of moving forward. But like you said,
this
they have
is the
talent.
opposite. This is the inverse of the thing we talked about the Patriots, though, right? Like the Cowboys have the ingredients.
Yeah, they have the talent. For sure.
If it's a chef issue, then but like I still think that the talent is going to win out, like eventually. Like I said, I would buy if anyone is dumping Lamb or Pollard. Like I want those guys.
I would say especially true of Pollard because he's getting the touches. And if he's getting the touches and it's not they're not going to have these weird game scripts the entire year. We said the same thing about the Vikings last year, and it just kept going the entire year. So we would assume they're not going to have these weird game scripts all year.
But you look at the schedule coming up, and you got Chargers, then they go on by, then you got like Rams, Eagles. There's at least some competitive games in there, and then then you might have a run here, Giants, Panthers, where it's like back to the same old BS of just like, all right, we'll let the defense win this one.
Yeah. That'll be.
But fantasy playoffs, you got Bills and Dolphins, Lions. That's the fantasy playoffs for the Cowboys. Bills, Dolphins, Lions. Like that's gotta be somewhat intriguing.
Yeah, I have actually in my best ball manias, I have a lot of Lions Cowboys stack because I was targeting that game, and now it looks like the Lions defense is actually not bad, and so that could be, and the Cowboys offense is not great, and so we'll see. Long way to go. Long way to go.
It still is 5 weeks. I mean, there's gonna be so many things that like we look back on that just change, and it's so fluid in the NFL. And there's only like 4 good teams in the NFL, anyways.
You're not lying. Every week when I try to do the power rankings, my list of teams I'm comfortable having in the top 10 shrinks, and I think it's 5 now. I think I'm comfortable having 5 teams in the top 10 of my power rankings. It's not. It's tough out there. It's tough out there. Something that we might see change here coming out of the bye week for the Chargers is I'm interested to see what happens with Quentin Johnston. Josh Palmer came in. He was very clearly the number 2 wide receiver the week after the Mike Williams injury. That's what we all expected. He did get a 51-yard catch to ice the game against the Raiders, which was a massive play. It was a huge play, not taking anything away from him. But before that, he had 2 catches for 26 yards on 7 targets, that's who Josh Palmer is. And so they drafted Quentin Johnston to kind of be the guy that could fill in if something happened to Mike Williams, something happened to Keenan Allen. I think they wanted to take it slow. They didn't want to really force him into the game, but now they've had a bye week. Mike Williams isn't coming back this season. I think we might see a little more Quentin Johnson this week, and I'm interested in him, especially since it's Monday night. If you're playing Showdown, I'm kind of interested in Quentin Johnston this week, just because I think maybe we'll see more usage from him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we see him get a big bump, and we kind of talked about that. It was going to be Josh Palmer initially, but that we probably would see Quentin Johnson eventually. Just they would have to put him in and have to rely on him. I am curious to see though, like where he hits the ground running. And how much elevation he can get being a player that he wasn't in college, because we've seen when you remove Mike Williams from this offense, it's a 1-game sample, but when they lost that vertical component of the offense, Herbert by far had his worst game. The Raiders took away the middle of the field in that game, and because they just weren't scared of anybody to beat them over the top. And like I said, Herbert by far at his lowest, completion rate, his fewest yards per pass attempt in a game he's had this season. And if Quentin Johnston can't be that guy, is it going to be a situation where we dealt with last year when Mike Williams was out of the games, and it's like the ADOT gets reduced, Herbert's not this guy that like he was the kind of a couple weeks prior. We're getting like the bonanza, right? He was looking like the guy that he was prior because we need a vertical guy, right? Like we can't build the whole plane out of like short targets again. And that was an issue in week 4. So I'm really curious to see what they come out of the bye and have like adjusted in that capacity. Obviously, they're going to get Austin Eckler back as well. Herbert would not throw to any running backs at all while Austin Eckler is out. We know Eckler is going to come back and demand targets of himself, but that's another guy that's getting targets near the line of scrimmage and shallow. So I'm very curious to see if the Chargers are going to get something out of Quentin Johnston vertically. Because that's a huge component that needs, because we go back to last year when this team didn't have a vertical component in the offense, they look so good, right? So we saw it in week 4. Let's see what they come out of the bye and have.
Yeah, and I think we saw one target they pushed down the field to him in that game against the Raiders. I'm trying to remember. I mean, it's been 2 weeks ago, and it was a contested situation. And again, we've said this a couple times. We talked. Ryan McChrystal, our draft guy, talks about it. You look at Quentin Johnson, you think, oh, he's going to be down the field and contested, and that was not what he was in college at all. He is a yards after catch guy. He's great at it, but that's what he is. And you're right. Are they going to be able to use him there? And you mentioned kind of the ADOT with Eckler coming back. Then like that even hurts that more. I have pulled up a stat with Eckler on the field in his career. Justin Herbert has a 6.3 ADOT. With Eckler off the field, he has an 8.2 ADOT in his career.
Right.
Like that's a significant difference.
Yeah.
And so
you have
are
a running
we going
back
to see with
targets?
What'd you say?
That's because you have a running back that commands targets.
Exactly. And so it's going to be there. Yeah, it's going to be there. And Keenan Allen's there as well. I'm interested to see what happens with Keenan Allen's target share. I do think that he's the number one receiver. They're going to have to pepper him with targets. But I do wonder if Eckler is going to kind of take some of the ceiling away from that, given kind of the way that he's used. So that'll be interesting to watch.
To a lesser degree, this also is what did the Seahawks do with Jackson Smith and Jigba coming out of the bye, right? Like what kind of calibration have they made? He's in another spot where we would look to see some adjustments made, and are we going to see them?
Yeah, and so he's in a spot where, and we can actually just go right in that game, the Seahawks and the Bengals. He's in a spot where it makes sense kind of to get him more involved in this specific matchup. But even if they do we care if he's going to continue to get used in the way that he's been
Right.
used to this point? So I don't know. Like I don't have off the top of my head what his air yards per target is, but it must be like 2. It's 3.2. It's not. I mean, that's not. You don't have to use Jackson Smith and Jigba that way. I understand kind of that's somewhat the archetype of receiver that he is, but he needs to like
45% of his targets are at or behind the line of scrimmage, 85% within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage.
You could use him down the field, everybody. And I do wonder, we've seen the Seahawks offense be a little bit more towards the line of scrimmage because of the issues they've had along the offensive line. It seems like Charles Cross is going to come back this week. I believe he practiced on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
We're recording this before practices on Thursday. And so maybe if they get Cross back and they feel a little bit more comfortable with this offensive line, we could see some more push down the field. That would be great for DK Metcalf as well. And so maybe we see that usage change. But the way that they've used Jackson Smith and Jigba to this point has been disappointing, both in how often he's been on the field, how often they're using 2 tight ends, and how often Geno Smith is throwing near the line of scrimmage has been a bit of a disappointment so far.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any way. I mean, JSN, if he doesn't come out of this bye with any different usage changes, I mean, he has to be considered like a drop candidate. He just has to be.
Yeah, no, like he's already there to me, but you're right. At least we're holding on some hope here. A guy that we held on to hope for and it ended up paying off. That's Jamar Chase, who nuked the Cardinals that the Cowboys couldn't score points against. Nuked them last week. Massive game. Was 115 catches, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Is that right? That's off the top of my head, something like that. Absolutely massive game. And you mentioned this, you wrote it in the worksheet last week, and it could happen again this week. This is another example of when Chase is playing without T. Higgins, he's going to get a ton of targets and catch a lot of passes. And we could get excited about Tyler Boyd, and we could get excited about Trenton Irwin, who I did have a big game last week. But really, this passing game is just going to run through Jamar Chase, and they're going to give him every target he can handle. if T Higgins is
Yeah, and we saw it last year, even when Chase missed time too, because both Chase and Higgins missed time. Like nothing really changed for Boyd, like at all. Like he got a few more targets, but like he never was like became fantasy viable. Like when either guy was off the field last year, so it never really he's never gotten that boost. But yeah, Chase. I mean,
that
the
was
one
my
that
argument. Actually, to that point, that was my argument against drafting Boyd in redraft this August. I go, what is the point? Like he was
right,
being drafted, and he is probably a guy. This is a conversation we have every. I think you and I have had this conversation every single August about how the the difficulty with like these ranking competitions is that Tyler Boyd is probably going to finish higher than his average draft position just from accumulation because
right.
that's the way he is. But he's never ever. He's very rarely. He does have spike weeks because he's attached to this offense, and it seems like Joe Burrow is back to being Joe Burrow, so that's great. But he's going to have spike weeks, but he's very rarely going to affect winning, even if T. Higgins or Jamar Chase missed time. And we saw that last year when both of them missed time. It still didn't really matter that this was happening. And so it's just another reminder of, you say that, well, Tyler Boyd finished as the wide receiver 47 or whatever it was last year. That doesn't tell the story. You need some context to it. Is he affecting winning? And it doesn't seem like even whenever Higgins and Chase are missing, he's the kind of guy that affects winning. Sorry, mini soapbox rant, just something
Yeah,
to
yeah.
remember for next draft season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've given Zach Taylor a lot of grief over the last couple of years, but I will say the one thing that this coaching staff has consistently done was recognize the talent they have in Chase and completely always calibrate trying to get him the football as much as they can. We saw it in his rookie season when he opened up and just was like dominating down the field, and the team started to adjust. The Bengals completely adjusted the back half of his rookie season and started getting more targets near the line of scrimmage. Last year, they used him in a completely different capacity than his rookie season. He became like a full field, like full route tree guy, and his targets like went through the moon compared to his rookie season. And then this year, when Burrow was kind of going through some issues that they had, they started moving Chase into the slot. They were like, hey, if we've got to just sit back and shotgun and get rid of the football in 2 nanoseconds because our quarterback can't move, we've got to get our star wide receiver in a spot where he's running routes that can just get the ball and facilitate him in that area. So like I have consistently calibrated their offense around just getting Chase the football as much as possible, and we do like that. We got to give you some credit there, Zach Taylor. So anytime you have a player of this caliber getting this many targets, though, you just take them, man. You just take them and you run, and you don't care about matchups. You don't care anything. You just like, sure, you might run into a week like 2 weeks ago where he has the 7 for 73, but like if that's like a floor outcome, like so be it. Anytime Jamar Chase is going to be pushing 30 to 40% of the team targets, you just got to get him and jam him in as much as possible.
It's kind of why I wanted to talk about him a little bit because on the other side of this, I'm, before the bye week, we were all, you and I were big on Darren Waller. There were Darren Waller props sent out from the Sharp Football pick machine. We loved Darren Waller against the Seahawks defense. And what we saw was Tariq Woolen came back. And when Tariq Woolen came back, that allowed Devin Witherspoon to move into the slot and absolutely smother Darren Waller and Paris Campbell and Wan'Dale Robinson. Devin Witherspoon gave up 3 catches for 19 yards the entire game. The Seahawks were already really good on the outside. It now seems like they're moving Devin Witherspoon inside whenever they're in, those 3 cornerbacks on the field. And if they're able to do that, and suddenly they're good on the inside, they're good on the outside, they're able to smother the slot receivers and the tight ends. This might be a secondary that we need to shy away from. We still got a long way to go. It was one game, it was against the Giants. But I'm very interested to see what the secondary does over the next few weeks. This will be a good test against the Bengals because they have the talent now back there and they're actually getting pressure. The defense actually getting pressure this year. This could be the Seahawks could go from somebody we target to somebody that we're not avoiding, but we're certainly shying away from a little bit. And I'm really interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, we'll see too. Artie Burns looks like he's going to miss this game too. He's still hurt, so maybe we just need him to come back to kind of open up a spot for to target. But yeah, they've got a ton of talent on there, and they were really good against boundary receivers last year. This game also is one of the weather games, right? Like the East Coast weather watch this week.
Yeah, have we got any updates on the weather watch?
I don't usually look this early. We'll see if it starts tonight in the Thursday game, where there's There's rumors there that it's going to be windy and rainy in Kansas City, so it could all start tonight. For this is like our first big weather week in the NFL.
I can't wait. Excited. I
Put them all
absolutely.
in domes, man.
I have. I agree. I agree completely that it's the college football is where college football, that's for the fun. That's for the love. That's where we don't worry about the weather. NFL, this is serious
We got
business.
a
We
product
need
here.
we
We have
need
a
domes
product that needs
for
all the
sure.
help it can get too. Like,
Yeah, given the
obviously,
offensive
people are going to
environment.
watch, but like, it's. I mean, the NFL once again, like, it's bad. Like, this is a bad. The NFL's put out a bad product again for people to start this year.
It's not been good. It's not been good. Boost Heather's telling us a chance of thunderstorms and some wind in Kansas City. Chance of rain showers in Chicago. Rain possibly in Cincinnati. Love it.
And I
Real
got boots on
excited.
the ground. Listen, Sunday morning, if you want me to go outside and you to find out, because I'm 20 minutes away from the stadium in Cleveland, you
Yeah,
can. I'll let you know because that total is 37 points. Like,
it's not. It's not good. I and like the 49ers have scored 30 points. What are we working on now? Like
8 straight regular
14 the
season
last
games.
15 games or something like that.
Yeah, 8 straight regular season games. They've got the 30 themselves, and that totals 37.
Yeah, that might be an overreaction. That might be a problem. Well, we're running out of time a little bit here. We do need to mention the backfield situation for the Colts. However, talking about that
I
Colts
have no
Jaguars
idea.
game, which I'm very interested in. All right, no idea. I do want to say this about that situation, and I made this joke. I made this joke on the Sunday recap pod after Zach Moss went wild against the Titans, one of the better run defenses in the league. I said this is why you pay a running back $14 million a year is so he can go wild against the Titans. Um, since the start of 2022, in the same team, by the way, Jonathan Taylor has 4.4 yards per carry, 10.6% 10 plus yard carry, and 18.7% negative carries, zero negative carries. In that same time, with the same team, now there's some caveats. Jonathan Taylor had some injury issues. Zach Moss has 4.9 yards per carry, 13.3% 10 plus yards, and 13.9% zero or negative. Just throwing that out there. That this you might have paid the wrong guy, or maybe don't pay anybody, any running backs. How about that?
Don't pay
We'll
anybody.
talk. We'll talk a little bit about uh, kind of the offense without Anthony Richardson when we get into Uncut Gems. I do want to bring something up about the Jaguars passing game. I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it seems like Calvin Ridley's probably going to be popular in DFS this week, given
Oh
what
yeah.
happened against the Colts last on week 1, right? That's what we're projecting.
Well, I think just in general, from a top-down stance, like the cat's out of the bag. Like, people are just going to target wide receivers against the Colts. DeAndre Hopkins was a popular. He ended up being a lot more popular than I thought. Like, by the time we got to actual Sunday, his ownership was surprising to me. But that was a sign that like people are looking at the right stuff. And then he had 8 for 140, and people were questioning whether or not like DeAndre Hopkins was kind of dusty or not. So
Exactly.
and then you have a game too where Ridley already had a good game against the Colts, but structurally it just makes sense, even if you remove all that, because Gus Bradley plays so much cover 3. They play the most cover 3 in the NFL. Calvin Ridley leads the team in targets per outrun and yards per outrun against cover 3. It does. There's a lot of signals here for Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley's one of these guys like fantasy people are just so impatient, man. Like, the guy's played 5 games. He's got 7 or more targets in every game but one. He's got 100 yards in 2 different games, a touchdown in another game. Like, and people are acting like this dude was like terrible, just like a terrible pick. Like, it's 5 games and he's a wide receiver. He's been kind of okay.
One thing I'll say about Ridley here, this is why I brought this topic up, is because I've been paying attention to Ridley's usage, and Ridley's usage since week 1, where he's being used, has changed dramatically. And it kind of coincides with the Zay Jones injury, and we'll see if Zay Jones is able to come back. But over the first 2 games, Calvin Ridley got 8.6 air yards per target. Over the last 3 games, he's at 15.9 air yards per target. It's not one big game or one small game propping that up. That was consistent for 2 weeks, and then it was consistent for 3 weeks. And we've seen Trevor Lawrence in this 3 games against this Colts team with Doug Peterson. We've seen him trend more towards throwing near the line of scrimmage. He has 6.8 yards per air yards per attempt in 3 games against the Colts, 76.2% of his passes, 10 air yards or fewer. Overall, over the last 2 years, that's 7.3 air yards per attempt, 70% behind the line of scrimmage or short, so 10 air yards or fewer. I wonder if we're overlooking that this is actually a Christian Kirk game, especially if Zay Jones is actually out, because that fits better with how Christian Kirk's been used over the last 3 weeks.
But he's
And
never been
I
good in
think I'm
this
going to be
matchup. While that's been true,
yeah. So I think that I'm going to be very heavy on Christian Kirk and maybe a little bit lighter on Calvin Ridley and DFS this week.
well,
Maybe
in
that
large
bites
fields you
me.
should just from a game theory stance.
Absolutely, the game theory part of it as well. So anyway, just something to file away that maybe go a little heavy in on Kirk this week, especially if Zay Jones is out. All right,
And
let's move
Ridley's
on
bad game
to
against the Texans was self-induced. Like that wasn't even like anything else. Like it had to do with him. He dropped a touchdown and had another one.
yeah, no, and like you said, we were worried about Zay Jones for 2 weeks. I mean, about Christian Kirk for 2 weeks, and now Zay Jones missed time, and we're right back to Christian Kirk being in on 95% of the
Yep.
dropbacks. And if he's going to be on 95% of the dropbacks, it's going to work out for him
The
more
big
than
thing
not,
from
especially
the
in the future.
Jaguars is if ETN is going to get goal to go carries, like he could contend with being like arguably like the RB2, RB3 in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that is an interesting thing too. Like if you wanted to leverage off of Calvin Ridley, we're not going to get deep into DFS talk here, but like if you could just play Etienne and Kirk and have just as good of projections maybe, and get some leverage off of that. So there's something to throw out there. Although I guess the Colts have been better against the run. Something to think about. All right. Let's move on to Uncut Gems. You actually brought one this week. You brought an Uncut Gem for us this week after you didn't last week. Last week, by the way, Rashee Rice, it didn't work out for the reasons we want, but he got a touchdown. We're counting it. That's another win for the Uncut Gem segment. Who do you got? Who do you got this week?
Yeah, I've got Josh Downs this week for some of the stuff you hinted on. It's just really the quarterback change, right? And we knew there's going to be some instability in this passing game when Anthony Richardson is under center, just because he's a volatile passer. And we've lived that life with Michael Pittman a little bit. But Josh Downs is the guy that's seen the big significant difference in usage with depending on what quarterback's been under center so far this season. With Minshew in the game, Downs has been targeted on 26.7% of his routes and is 25.3% of the team targets. With Anthony Richardson in the game, it's 16.7% of his routes, 16% team target share. And it's not like Minshew's had like this one game sample. Like the dude's played basically 2 full games. He's been in 3 games. And Josh Downs has 20 of his targets when he's thrown the football. So, if it's only 2 teams on bye, but if you had injuries and some stuff's kind of falling apart for you, like looking for a guy to just like come in and be a viable target earner as like a wide receiver 3 flex, like, Josh Downs, you could do worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I played the Josh Downs over prop the last time that Gardner Minshew started
Yeah,
against
yeah.
Baltimore, and it worked out perfectly. I will be playing Josh Down over props this week as well. In fact, that's one of the overs that's in Ryan McChrystal's over under article that he does every week, which is really good. You should go and read it. Actually, if you're listening to this live, it's not quite up on the site. As soon as we get off this podcast, it will be my job to go and post it on the site. So it'll be up on the site if you're listening to this on podcast for sure. But yeah, we all like Josh Downs when Minshew's starting, and especially if you're in kind of the prop market, you're going to get some value on him with Minshew while things are catching up. My guy, even though we talked about like I kind of negative about the Cowboys, and even though it didn't work out for me last week when I captained him in Showdown, I'm going right back to the Michael Gallup because the targets have been there. Even with Cooks active the last 3 weeks, he's had a target on 20.5% of his routes, 18.2% target share, which is the same as CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, there have been some weird games in there, and so you take that with a grain of salt. 4 of Dak Prescott's 13 targets of 20 air yards or more have targeted Gallup. So Gallup's getting those targets down the field. And this is the matchup for those to hit. If they're going to start hitting those targets, if they're going to start creating those big plays, this is the one to hit. There have been 10 catches of 20 or more air yards against the Chargers. They're allowing over 50% of the attempts to be caught of 20 air yards or more. The NFL average is 36.8%. 10.9% of passes against the Chargers are getting 20 yards or more, which is the 3rd highest in the league. This is the game for them to get going deep if it's going to happen. And so I'm going to put some faith in Michael Gallup actually catching a few of those down the field. So that's my Michael Gallup story. And if it doesn't work this week, I'm just never playing him ever again. 2 weeks in a row. If you do me 2 weeks in a row, you burn me 2 weeks in a row, then that's over. So listen to that, Michael. Catch one of those deep passes for me. What about any closing thoughts we have here heading into week 6?
Yeah, I mean it's not a great looking slate. Hopefully we get a little better, product. It's like a movie, right? If you don't have expectations, you can't be let down. So hopefully that happens this weekend, and we got some surprises. We do have the Giants on prime time, which we didn't mention. I think this is the final time they're on prime time, thankfully and mercifully, for us to have to watch. And there's no London game after this week for a few weeks, thankfully and mercifully.
No, week 9, and there are no more London games. Actually, the final 2
Is the
international
Germany
games are
one?
in Frankfurt. Yeah, I believe they're Frankfurt, Germany, is I believe where they are. You actually mentioned it. It's not a great slate. This is the kind of week that you get upsets with all of these big spreads. We have 6 of 15 games are currently a spread of 7 or more. 3 games with double-digit spreads. This is all anecdotal. There's no numbers behind this, but this
Do
is
you
the
have
kind
one?
of week that
Do you have an upset?
yeah,
Are you calling one?
I'm not. All I know is this: is that if you take a money line parlay with all of the big home favorites, with the Bills, Dolphins, and Chiefs, uh, there's a decent chance that you get upset by that. If you had to pick one of those three to disappoint you, which one of those three would you pick to disappoint you?
I guess the Chiefs by default. Like I can't see the Panthers scoring enough points to beat the Dolphins.
Dolphins are definitely not it. Yeah, the Dolphins are definitely not it. Maybe the Bills coming back from London with all their injuries on defense. The Giants, Brian Daboll in his revenge game. That's the thing.
If Tyrod starts, maybe
Oh yeah, Tyrod. Actually, yeah, that
the
actually might be
double
the one. We
revenge
get a
game.
Tyrod start.
But I mean, I think you
But
look
yeah,
at just as far as dogs that I think are live. Obviously, I think the Cardinals are live for sure. I think the Bucks are
yes,
probably more live than people think that they are. Um,
yeah,
so those are two teams I think that stand out.
yeah. I think that those are good as well, and especially that Cardinals that line being 7. Um, it is in LA, but that line being 7, that is the one of the kind of the bigger lines that does stand out to me. But yeah, I don't. It's just that kind of week. That kind of week. I think it's gonna be an interesting week. Hopefully that gets started tonight on Thursday night with the Chiefs and the Broncos. If you're listening to this on Friday, you already know what happens. So we'll see. By the way, we do a preview, a DFS and betting preview on Thursdays, right before Thursday Night Football on the YouTube channel. It's Ryan McChrystal, who I mentioned earlier, and Todd Burrows. So go and check that out. If you listen to us live, you're going to get that. If you're not listening to us live, listen to us on a Friday on the podcast. You can go to it next week. It's a really good podcast. Go and check that out. Stay tuned to the podcast feed. I have a ton coming out. Go to Sharp Football Analysis. Reminder, we're running that special, that slasher special. Use promo code SLASH to get 79% off any of our weekly packages at sharpfootballanalysis.com. It's a massive deal. Go and check it out. Get all of Rich's worksheets, get all of Warren Sharp's betting recommendations with the all access package. Make sure you go and check that out, and have a good week. And we'll talk to you soon.